I'm Warren Berkeley with the Laurel Heights Church of Christ, and we are here to resume our video studies in Ecclesiastes. This time, we're in the latter part of chapter 5, and it will be our opportunity to learn more about how life here on earth, when God is left out, cannot provide the meaning or satisfaction we need, and certainly cannot prepare us for death. Solomon says earlier in chapter 5, God is the one we must fear. A heart that respects God produces the life of respect for Him that is fulfilling here under the sun, and of course has ultimate eternal fulfillment. Are you ready? Ecclesiastes 5, verses 8 through 20. If you see in a province the oppression of the poor, and the violation of justice and righteousness, do not be amazed at the matter. For the high official is watched by a higher, and there are yet higher ones over them. But this is gain for a land in every way, a king committed to cultivating fields. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. And what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? Sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. There is a grievous evil that I have seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owner to his hurt, and those riches were lost in a bad venture. And he is father of a son, but he has nothing in his hand. As he came from his mother's womb, he shall go again, naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil, that he may carry away in his hand. This also is a grievous evil. Just as he came, so shall he go. And what gain is there to him who toils for the wind? Moreover, all his days he eats in darkness, in much vexation and sickness and anger. Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and enjoy life in all the toil with which one toils under the sun the few days of his life that God has given him, for this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power, to enjoy them, and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, this is the gift of God, for he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. First, I want to call attention to one statement in verse 8 that will be our taking off point. Do not be amazed. If you have the NIV, do not be surprised. New King James, do not marvel. Now, let's look into this paragraph and pay attention to these realities of life under the sun. Oppression of the poor, violation of justice and righteousness. Sometimes gain for many means a loss for a few. The love of money, unexplained, sudden losses, dying with nothing, darkness, vexation, sickness, and anger. Are you depressed yet? But Solomon's point is never to depress us, but to rattle us and shake us up to see that life here on earth under the sun is vain and troublesome when we leave God out. So, as we navigate life and encounter these realities here, Solomon tells us ahead of time, don't be surprised. If we see that weak, poor people are oppressed, justice and righteousness is ignored, that should not surprise us. This is the way it is. Do not be amazed. Now, let's give specific attention to this in the second part of verse 8. For the high official is watched by a higher, and there are yet higher ones over them. There are some translations that differ in the way this is written. I'm using the ESV, English Standard Version. For the high official is watched by the higher, and there are yet higher ones over them. In the NIV, one official is eyed by the higher one, and over them both are others who are higher still. If you have the New King James, for high official watches ever high official, and higher officials are over them. Whatever this is, it is connected to the oppression of the poor and the violent perversion of justice and righteousness. I'm going to tell you what I see, and you may or may not see what I'm going to describe in this passage. When the poor are oppressed, and when justice and righteousness is ignored, do not be surprised if there are high officials in power who are watching each other, but they're not attending to the needs of the people. And in these layers and levels of government and bureaucracy, what is good and right gets lost because they have formed an isolated hierarchy. That's my paraphrase of this verse. I cannot insist anyone sign on to my paraphrase, but that's my take on verse 8. Let's listen to verse 8 again. If you see in a province the oppression of the poor and the violation of justice and righteousness, do not be amazed at the matter. For the high official is watched by a higher, and there are yet higher ones over them. So, they're watching each other, but not attending to the needs of the people. When the poor are oppressed, and when justice and righteousness is ignored, do not be surprised if there are officials who have formed an isolated hierarchy, and they're watching each other, but they're not attending to the needs of the people. What is good and right gets lost in that process. Do not be surprised. Verse 9 affirms that in this closed system described in verse 8, there may be some gain for the land, sometimes claimed as the greater good. There may be some productivity in the cultivation of the fields, and therefore a good economic system, a monetary gain. Some of the highest levels of productivity may occur in civilizations where the people's needs are not met. The people are enslaved. Lots of production going on, but the people are enslaved. Oppression seems to be a repeated theme over and over in the book of Ecclesiastes, and the application here is, do not be surprised if you see that. I want to take you back to 1 Samuel 8, verses 10 through 18. Do you remember back when Israel demanded a king and what they were told about that and the eventualities of it? 1 Samuel 8, 10 through 18. So Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking for a king from him. He said, "These will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and daughters and appoint them to his chariots and to be his horsemen and to run before his chariots. And he will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and commanders of fifties, and some to plow his ground and some to reap his harvest. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers," and on and on. The people were told what it would be like under a king, and that comes up again here in Ecclesiastes chapter 5. From verse 10 in Ecclesiastes 5 over through 19, there's one primary reality: the grievous evil of the love of money. Not the earning of money, the possession of money, not the use of money, the love of money. So Solomon again says, don't be surprised. Where there is big oppressive government and an enslaved class underneath that isolated government, along with the love of money, life here on earth under the sun can offer very little for the people on the bottom. Add to that, excluding God and all his vanity and a striving after wind. You know, one problem is the person who is in love with money is never really satisfied. You cannot fill the empty place in your heart with money. You cannot fill the empty place in your heart with money. Only God fits that empty place. Another problem with the love of money is certain economic under the sun realities, like kids and inflation. Verse 11, when goods increase, they increase who eat them, and what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? You ever thought about just seeing the money come in? And you look at it for a minute, then you see the money go out. If you get on your computer and look at your bank account every day, I think I know what you will see. You watch the money come in and watch it go out. You just hope that what comes in will always be a little more than what goes out. Solomon says, don't be surprised. Then he says, sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. Whatever your income level, little or much, there is peace and satisfaction if you worked hard responsibly to have that money. Wealth you gain through oppression, injustice, what we sometimes call ill-gotten gain, or career obsession will likely keep you up at night. Don't be surprised about that, but sweet is the sleep of the responsible laborer. Now, it is not just good income. It is not just wealth. Remember, the love of money is the disabling element in this narrative. Verse 13 is compelling. Riches kept by the owner to his hurt. Hoarding. Not just riches kept, but riches kept by the owner to his hurt. Wealth hoarded to the harm of its owner. That's the way it reads in the NIV. This is excess that is obsessively hoarded. This is not just money, not just lots of money, and not keeping or investing. This is obsessive hoarding of excess that is inordinate, that is failed stewardship, selfish, and a creator of grief. Solomon says, don't be surprised if you see this here under the sun. You know what Jesus said? Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Sometimes riches are lost in a bad adventure. Solomon brings that up in verse 14. Don't be surprised if you see it. It leads us back to the conclusion. If you seek personal fulfillment in money, what happens when a loss occurs? Our economy is not as predictable as we would like it to be. There are not perfectly absolute promises we can hold to when it comes to money and investment. You've heard the expression, here today, gone tomorrow. Money can make you happy in a shallow, temporal sense. Long-term happiness has to come from some other source. Verse 15. We leave just like we came. We didn't have anything when we showed up here on earth. Same way when we leave. You've heard me say, you never see a funeral car pulling a U-Haul trailer. Just as we come, so shall we go. Here on earth, don't be surprised to see vexation, sickness, and anger, and then you die. What should our reaction to all this bleak reality be? Fear God and keep His commandments. Ecclesiastes 5:18-20. Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given him, for this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them, and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil. This is the gift of God, for he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. God is all over the last part of this chapter. Reading and studying through this section, we are likely to be disappointed by some of the things that disturb and surprise us. But thank God, with Him in our life, we're living for eternity. We're not living for the time that's here under the sun. I found, based on a writer by the name of Randy Alcorn, I found this paraphrase of this part of Ecclesiastes. Whoever loves money never has money enough. The more you have, the more you want. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with his income. The more you have, the less you're satisfied. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. The more you have, the more people, including the government, come after you. And what benefit are they to the owner except to feast his eyes on them? The more you have, the more you realize you can look at it, but it doesn't really meet your purpose in life, your inner needs. The sleep of the laborer is sweet, whether he eats little or much, but the abundance of the rich man permits him no sleep. The more you have, the more you have to worry about, often late at night. I have seen a grievous evil under the sun, wealth hoarded to the harm of its owner. The more you have, the more you can hurt yourself by trying to find a place to put it and hold on to it. Or wealth lost through some misfortune. The more you have, the more you have to lose. And then, naked a man comes from his mother's womb, and as he comes, so he departs. He takes nothing from his labor that he can carry in his hand. The more you have, the more you have to leave behind. Just a few wrap-ups. Greed is self-destructive. Your heirs will likely be consumers, not investors. The righteous person is not preoccupied with his mortality. Instead, the righteous person is focused on his relationship with God now and after he dies. Max Anders, in his commentary on Ecclesiastes, said, "None of us can control our birth or our death. Cryogenics will not save us any more than mummification saved the pharaohs of Egypt. There is no profit for the person who spends his entire life laboring for what he'll have to say goodbye to at the point of death." Thank you for being with us in this study.